It's back to school time, and I know a lot of people have been, starting to get ready for back to school. By the time this will be out, school will already be in session, but do things feel or look different this year compared to last year at the start of school?
I mean, I'm super excited for a year, but I always am. I think this year has a little extra layer of excitement, getting our kids back to Temple Hill where they were displaced last year. I know the families and students and staff are really excited about that, and I'm excited for that as well. But you go into every year excited and looking forward to it, and coming off the heels of the year we had last year, I think it's fair to say there's some extra excitement to hopefully, fingers crossed, prayers up, have a normal, great school year.
Tell me about kind of that weekend. September 27th was whenever it all started happening. Walk me kind of through that day.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously ended up being a really tough day, but the morning of that, felt like there was a bad forecast, but, most of the time the forecast doesn't develop the way, that bad, of course. And, just started getting word that I got a call from the sheriff saying, we need you to go open up the high school. We're having to helicopter, people off the roof of the hospital. And I just live about 2.5 miles from the hospital, and all I was seeing was rain. And I couldn't get that in my head. Like, what do you mean? And he said, the water is to the roof of the hospital. I knew where our hospital was in that valley, and I thought, I just couldn't picture it. So I went to the high school and opened it up, and sure enough, here come the helicopters, taking patients and doctors and all the staff off. And then I started getting videos, people were sending videos, and it was just a really surreal day, and then, trying to get those people settled, and then trying to also understand, of course, my first thought was our students, our families, our staff, our school on that end of the county, Temple Hill. And at first I was hearing things saying it's gone. I thought, well, it might be, if the hospital has been hit like that. Ended up not being that bad, but that day just was really scary because there was so many things we didn't know that we later found out. And then you just start doing a Rolodex of families and students and staff who live on that end of the county, and just, trying to decipher and process what that was like for them, and who had survived and who hadn't, and what was lost and what wasn't. So it was a really tough day.
Had y'all canceled school that morning?
We had already canceled school on the forecast, thankfully, because I've said a million times, had we been in school, we'd have been in real trouble. Like, I've heard the term flash flood my whole life, but I'd never really seen the flash part. And all of that happened within about 30 minutes. It went from okay to not. And had we been in school, a lot of people don't think about this and get really frustrated with us when we make a decision to close school. And generally, we have to make that decision based off of a forecast. Because whether it's wind or rain or snow, flooding, if you wait till it starts, you've waited too late if kids are in school. Because you're going to have about 2 hours to turn around buses getting to the school, loading kids up, getting them all delivered. You have young drivers on the road. So we have to make that call in advance, and I'm very thankful that morning that we weren't in school, because we would have not been able to get kids home.
Let's talk about Temple Hill and what exactly happened, because I know that the pipes burst and flooded the school. What kind of happened? When did you get word about that?
Well, so I ended up going up that next morning because the roads were all closed and blocked. And so they got me up there to look at it. And really, that school is a two-tiered school. So the only flooding that happened was the gym, the cafeteria, and the electrical room. Of course, the electrical room was the whole key. The gym floor buckled really bad as a wood floor. But the classrooms weren't affected. Like, that level didn't get it. But I knew we weren't going to be able to finish the year there, just on the electrical side alone. All that had to be replaced. The gym floor was going to have to be replaced. And so, but again, when I laid eyes on it and realized, okay, it's not gone, because there were some people coming into the high school where I was at saying, it's gone. So there for a while, I was trying to imagine, and that's the school I went to, actually, K-8. Temple Hill was my school as a student. So I was devastated by that for a lot of reasons. And then when I was able to lay eyes on it, I knew, okay, we can fix this stuff. We can get these kids back. But of course, we had to figure out for the rest of that year, which at that time, day 2 of the flood, I didn't even know when we could get anybody back. The interstate was broken half here. I knew on the south end roads were washed out, bridges were washed out. So we're having to think about power was out, for a lot of the county. And at that time, there weren't really answers on when all that was going to be opened up. And so I'll be honest, my first thought was we'll be lucky to be back in school by Christmas, and that was September 27th. We were able to get in 3 weeks later somehow, I'm thankful for that. And we were blessed that it was just 3 weeks. A lot of people worked really hard to shorten that time frame, and I'm grateful for that.
I think what was so crucial for the community during all of these flooding events after Helene was the role that schools played in kind of being a hub of resources, and also you guys were checking in on families because you guys were going through your roster to make sure that all of these kids and all of these families were accounted for. Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, and that's what you want to be always. Like, to me, a school system is the backbone of a community, and so certainly in a time like that, you wanted to be. And we opened up our facilities for shelters and for command centers and things, and that's what you would do, for your community. You just want to serve. Like, how can we as a school system serve? And our staff, I'm telling you, our admin, our food service, our teachers, support staff, our custodial staff, like, they just stepped up in ways that I knew what type of system we had and what type of people we had, but in a moment like that, you really find out. And they were so poured into serving that at times I had to try to make them go home. Like, you've been here 3 straight days, go home and rest. They didn't want to, and you didn't want to pull the boss card and say, you have to go home. But in some of those cases I had to, look, I've seen you here for 48 straight hours, go home. But that's how big their heart was, to serve, not just our students in that moment, but it was to serve our community and to serve those who had been displaced or lost loved ones and lost their home. And I was super proud of our school system and our entire community's response to it, but school system stepped up in a big way. I was proud of everyone.
What was the impact that you saw within the school system that were affected by Helene?
Well, and like you said, the first few days it was trying to contact everyone because power was out, phones were down, and you couldn't get to places on that end of the county. I mean, we had our local, first responders and our emergency responders taking side-by-sides and 3-wheelers and 4-wheelers back in the mountains to get to people, because that's what we have on that end of the county is a lot of mountains, a lot of tough terrain. And so it was difficult for all of us for those first few days because your mind just goes to the worst places. Like, how many of our kids are gone, and fortunately we didn't lose any students, but we had students lose their parents, and we knew that was devastating, and then we had staff and students lose their home. And so once we were able to, and it took a minute to figure out everything because, again, the communication was so challenging those first few days, doing a lot of praying, that people were okay and that it wasn't as bad as you were starting to feel like. And luckily it was bad, but it truly, I can look back and say it probably didn't end up being as bad as that day 1 or day 2, the mind thinking, how just as devastating it was going to be. But we had students and people that we all knew that we lost and staff that lost their home, and that was tough.
Mm-hmm. What were the ways that the school system stepped in to support those families? I know that you guys did a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and there's probably things that happen that we still can never quantify. People were just doing, our churches here in Unicoi were phenomenal. But, we opened up our high school as a shelter, first of all, people to lay their head down somewhere for a few days until things got sorted out. But most of our families had family or friends or someone in their church that opened up their home to them. So a lot of our people didn't end up necessarily immediately having to use our high school as a shelter. Some did, but a lot of our folks, ended up joining another family member's home and living there until things got squared away. But, the food side of things, the counseling side of things, we had a lot of our staff and student families who were having to deal with, family members who were missing. We had direct connects to the impact plastic situation on a staff and student side. So they would spend a lot of time at the school waiting for information, and so we had counseling there, we had food there, we had clinics there to help. And the donations that people sent in from a food and clothing and just day-to-day necessities, toilet paper. I mean, our school was full. You know, every classroom and our entire commons area, I think you were there, was just full of stuff, and it was unbelievable. And so we had to have manpower to man that, you know, to sort, to distribute. So we had people bringing in, and we had trucks and things going out, and again, at the center of that was a lot of our school staff who just said, I want to serve however. And at our middle school became the command center, so all of our law enforcement and first responders that was the hub for them, but they needed food. So, you know, our food service opened up both cafeterias and just constantly, you know, feeding volunteers and people who were displaced. And there was so many different roles that so many people had, it would be hard to name them all, but the spirit was just whatever's needed, whatever we need to do, we'll do, and I'll never forget that, you know.
You mentioned kind of the impact plastics, and we don't have to go into specifics, but a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people lost their livelihoods, their homes. There was impacts more than there, of course, was loss of human life, but there was loss of livelihood, and that wasn't maybe something that was always talked about.
Oh, no. But losing your job, it's devastating to people. You can go to your home that's still intact and you can have all of your family intact, but if you lost your job, which a lot of people did, and of course people are still feeling the effects of that, you know. That's the thing about an event like Helene and the devastation that we had, you know. Yes, we went back to school 3 weeks later, but people still today and forever will be dealing with the effects of that, you know, especially the loss of life and loss of your home. And I know people were there that talked about losing things that had been family relics, you know, was washed away. And so those are things that, you know, people will deal with forever. But again, I think the spirit of perseverance and strength was on full display too. Because what I said at the time, and I still think about, is some of the people that I knew had lost a family member or had a family member missing or had lost their home, they were at the school, but not to be served, but to serve. Like those very people who I knew were on the other end of this were up there saying, no, I'm not here for help, I'm here to help. And they were the ones serving. So, you know, you don't forget that. And that was the people that were affected the most were the ones that are saying, no, I'm not here for help, I'm here to help. So.
What does that say about this community?
Oh, yeah, the strength. And again, I've always known that. I'm so proud of our community and to be from here, but like nothing to this magnitude, but over the years, somebody has a house fire or, you know, devastating things happen in communities, but this is a community that rallies around their people and support their people, and certainly for Helene, that was on full display, but I've seen it my whole life.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that was kind of a story that we covered is all of the kids at Temple Hill had to go into the middle school. I did an interview. They had to get very creative. A counselor was in a storage closet. That was just kind of the reality of the situation. What was it like figuring out those logistics and communicating with families and trying to figure out, okay, well, these kids still have to learn?
Well, and a big brag to our Temple Hill staff, admin, and our families. You know, it took a minute to figure out, okay, what are we going to do, you know, to get these kids. Like you said, they still have to learn, and it wasn't going to be at Temple Hill. So I kind of just knew, just being familiar with our buildings, middle school was the place. We had the room there. Now, was it going to put some people in some situations, like you said, counselor in a closet? Yes. But for the kids, and I think you were there, like they were all in a regular classroom. I was really proud of our middle school staff and students because they were so good to the Temple Hill community, to the little kids. Because, you know, you can't help but worry about an 8th grader and a 1st grader and how's that mix. I went to school in a K-8. It was great, but it's different now. They were so good both ways, and we met with the family and had every family attend a meeting when we told them what was going to have to happen. There was no complaining. There was no fussing. They were like, okay, we'll make this work. I mean, just beautiful people. I'm telling you, beautiful people in this community. But the Temple Hill community, which again is where I grew up, they were just like, yeah, no, we're great. And they just made it happen. They made it work, and there wasn't any wailing or gnashing of teeth about it. They just understood, and the kids were great. And I think every one of them would tell you it had bumps. There's no way not to have bumps in that kind of mid-year transition. But it actually went really well, too.
Yeah. I think also something that was important about that transition is, like you said, these kids were in normal classrooms. How important was it to get students back to some sense of normalcy, a routine, a schedule, coming to school, seeing their friends, seeing their teachers? That's got to be crucial for kids that have just gone through something like this.
Yeah, that first day back was a really special day. Not just for the Temple Hill kids, but like, I went to each school that day intentionally because, there's academics and that's what we do, but the non-academic side of what we do is really important too. And we knew that for 3 weeks these kids had been not with each other, not with their friends. Some of them I'm sure had connected, but for a lot of them, they had a really tough 3 weeks. So to get them back to some normalcy and around their friends and with their teachers was a great day. And again, I was very thankful it was just 3 weeks, because on the front end of it, I was thinking, gosh, Thanksgiving, Christmas, like there's so much that we're going to have to do and figure out, and power and waste management system and bridges and roads. There's just a lot. And although 3 weeks felt like a long time, looking back, I'm still to this day surprised we got back in 3 weeks, considering all of the damage.
Now, looking at that damage, when did you first go and look at Temple Hill, and kind of what were your first thoughts when you saw everything, your first reactions?
Honestly, encouraged, because I had been at the high school from Friday morning till Saturday morning and hadn't left. But there were people coming in, saying, oh, it's gone, like that whole end is flooded. Well, I knew I couldn't get to it. There was too much going on at the high school. And then roads were shut off anyway. But honestly, when I got to Temple Hill and saw the school and went to every classroom and realized, first of all, our classrooms weren't damaged at all. So everything was intact there. That was very encouraging. To go from thinking about it's gone to seeing that, okay, the gym floor's buckled and the cafeteria's flooded, we can fix that. So I was actually very encouraged when I saw Temple Hill and was able to go there. And that was Saturday morning. So, worked with the sheriff's department. The sheriff had been in great communication with me. He was on that end, and he was saying, well, I don't think it's gone, like this was later in the day. There's going to be some damage, though. So to be able to get up there and lay eyes on it was actually a good thing, to see that, okay, we didn't lose this school, and we can fix what was damaged and get these kids eventually back.
What was the process like doing construction? I think you also said there were issues with electricity. Where do you even start with something like that?
Yeah, there always is. Listen, generators, and again, people were bringing generators because Temple Hill actually became a shelter too. So we knew like the gym and the cafeteria was flooded, but then just logistically it made sense for that community to have a place to go. So it became a distribution and receiving donation center, and some of our staff and some church folks and pastors just manned Temple Hill, and it was full of donations and things. So even though it wasn't operational for school, it was operational for its purpose during that time.
When did construction start, or what was that process? Did you have to replace the gym floor?
We did, yeah. And of course they were telling us, we knew once we made the decision to move Temple Hill to middle school, we weren't going to bring them back till August. Like, we probably could have gotten them back in April, but at that point they're settled at middle school. We're finishing out the year. You don't want to just zig and zag kids back. So there wasn't a rush to hurry and fix it. And they told us from day one, Tennessee Risk Management was unbelievable. All the people who worked were great, but there also wasn't from us the urgency of hurry up and get that fixed, because we knew those same people who were doing that were also taking care of other things with their skill set. So for me, I knew we weren't going back to Temple Hill till August. So I think the work began like in February, March, but they also told us from the get-go, once we get started, it won't take that long, and we will be ready well before August, and they were. Like I said, we probably could have gone back to school there at the end of the year, but that didn't make a lot of sense. I think it'll be nice to start the year back there, but to take them back for the last 3 or 4 weeks just didn't feel right. On the work end of, once teachers and everything got settled in those classrooms, you didn't want to make them pack up and go back for 3 weeks. So all of that work took place this summer.
When did teachers start kind of going back to Temple Hill?
Well, when it finished, when the work was complete, that of course all of their stuff that they needed, they left at the school till the end of school. But I think just to be back in the building, some of them were just going back up there, and they just missed their school. And the last day of school this year, they boxed up and our staff and maintenance and custodial crews moved them back. And then they've had to spend a lot of time this summer up there getting their rooms back, ready and set. An elementary classroom is a lot different than a high school classroom, as far as the stuff. And there's a lot of stuff, and those teachers do a great job of decorating the rooms and making them kid-friendly, but there's a lot that goes into that. So they've been up there a lot this summer, I think, getting their rooms ready for August 8th.
What are you excited about these kids walking back into their school that they haven't seen since the end of September? It's got to be an exciting thing to kind of think about.
Yeah, I know they're very excited to get back to their school. And they did great at middle school, they really did, but Temple Hill's their school, and so nobody saw that coming. So when you left school on September 25th, you didn't know you weren't going back that year. So I think our kids are going to be really excited, and the families, to get back to their home school.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, a lot of these little kids, but also for the entire school district, how this whole experience, we're coming up on a year, in about 2 months, how has this community changed since Helene?
Well, logistically things have changed, routes and, and roads and bridges, but in a lot of ways it's just stronger. It's stronger than it was before. I think, you go through things, whether it's individually or your family or your community, and you come out of it stronger, and I think Unicoi County is stronger than it was before. But again, for a lot of people, they're still dealing with it in very, very real ways. But I would say they would tell you they're stronger today than they were September 29th or 30th. And, as time goes, you just start to recover and pick yourself back up and move on and move forward. And I think that's what our community has done, and I knew it would, because again, I've seen it on smaller scales before, but we're closer, we're stronger. We're a small community, so just like any rural community, there are people who might have known each other forever, and maybe they get along, maybe they don't. It's just common. But in crisis, they all come together, and they did. And I think we're a stronger community than we were before Helene.
When people watch this story, what do you want them to know about the school system, about the kids in this community, the teachers, the staff? What do you want them to know?
Just how caring of a community it is. I would say that about our school system. There's just a huge heart for people here and for each other here. And we were all so appreciative too, because the response that we got within the community was unbelievable, but then in the region, you guys were phenomenal, supporting us. And so even across the country, we were getting pickup trucks from Ohio and from out west and California full of stuff that people just saw on the news and headed this way. We would have tractor and trailers pull in at 3 in the morning, and we were there because, again, we wanted the doors to be open 24/7. I just got in my truck, I loaded it up and headed this way, saw it on the news. So sometimes you can get discouraged, like on a national scale, of what you see and hear is happening in the world. But then in crisis, what we saw is there's still a lot of great, like, humanity still exists, and there's a big heart of people for people, and that was really encouraging. I think I said at the time, I didn't think devastation and inspiration could live in the same world, but they can. So as devastating as all that was, there was also a lot of inspiration in just how people, not just within our community, because that was definitely real, but outside of our community, how they responded. And there's a lot of great people in this world.
Yeah. I did an interview with someone recently out in Asheville who were lining up trucks to go to Central Texas with the flooding. And she said, I want everyone to think about the entire United States as a neighborhood, that we're all neighbors, that we all have something in common, that we're all people. Do you think that was true? here?
Oh, 100%. That's a better way of putting it than what I was saying, but that's 100% true here. And I know, because I had too many conversations with families and people, how grateful people were for that spirit that we saw from across this country, within the state, within the region, here in the community, but across the country. Like the outpour that we got, I think will leave an impression on people forever. I know it will me. Just the heart of humans is still real, and there's a lot of good in this world, even though it's easy to see certain aspects and get, jaded or whatever. But no, we were very blessed and thankful for the response that we had and for the care that was shown to our people in our community. For sure.
What does the future look like this school year? Is it moving past all of this? Is it remembering this and keeping going? What is the mindset?
I think moving forward is really important, but also with the respect of the impact that it had on people. Like, you can't forget that. And I think sometimes it's easy to get into day-to-day life, and like I said, we still have students and we still have staff who are dealing with this today. They'll deal with it tomorrow. And I think it's important to move forward on things, but it's also important to be respectful of, there were people whose lives changed forever that day. And as we serve them, whether it's our own staff members, we had teachers, counselors, people that were really impacted, or our students, that even though you want to move on with that respect, that there are people's lives who change forever. And so you got to walk that line of moving forward, but also understanding and respecting that the effects of that will live on forever for a lot of people.
Is there anything I didn't touch on that you want people to know?
I don't think so. Just, I still would say as a community, even though that was really tough, that we were blessed. God blessed us, people blessed us, and we came out of it stronger, and roads will be fixed and different things will be repaired. But it just left me with just even more pride of being thankful to be able to be part of a community that is so special.
Mr. English, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.